News for the Soul begins its 27th year in January 2024. Find out our latest news at newsforthesoul.com. Next on News for the Soul, learn intuitive skills with Tina. Tina Zion is a fourth-generation intuitive medium, an internationally known expert in medical intuition and mediumship. As an award-winning author and instructor, she teaches medical intuition and mediumship skills to students around the world. And now she's here to teach you on News for the Soul. Please welcome Tina Zion back to News for the Soul.
So actually, it's not welcome back today. It's welcome for the first time. This is the introduction show. Tina, welcome to News for the Soul.
Well, thank you so much. I'm tickled to be here.
Yay! Well, I'm looking forward to getting to know you this hour. We always start with the News for the Soul famous first question because it's the place that connects us as a community and movement that's now in its 27th year of our honest-to-gosh quest of trying to discover what's really real and what's really possible. So the famous first question is about appearances outside the 3D norm. I had a lot of those right from as early as I can recall in my life, and I know that they changed my life and changed the path and awareness levels of my path and where I was going in life. Thus, we're here on News for the Soul, which was apparently what I was supposed to create, to explore this with people around the world. I'm curious what your earliest recollection might be of something experiencing or seeing something outside the 3D norm that we were told was what was actually possible.
Well, I just remembered this not too long ago, but when we lived in this particular house, and I was about 5 years old, 6 years old, that there were spirit people in my bedroom, and one of them, in fact, it was an older male, actually kept coming in and pushing himself into my back. And as a little tiny kid, 5 years old, I felt like I was going to blow up. I felt like an overinflated balloon. And then he would just kind of pass on through, and a few days later it would happen again. And then I realized that I saw spirit people, and I usually thought that they were, in the physical. So that began my experiences. And the other thing that I would say is my family...
Actually, before you go to the next thing, let's talk about that thing.
Yeah.
So this male spirit in particular, did you get any detail around anything about him?
No, not at all, except his, I was 5 years old. I felt how massive he was. As a grown man, even in spirit, he felt very massive, and he didn't feel like he was harming me. It was just very, very uncomfortable, is how I would say it.
Interesting. And was he trying to, come in your body, like when you say pushing into your back?
Yes, he would come completely into my body, which is why I felt like a giant balloon, overinflated.
This is a new one. I haven't heard this one before. That's interesting.
I know, isn't it? That's strange. Yeah.
Yeah, but you didn't feel negative energy around it too much.
No, I didn't feel like he was, trying to be inappropriate. It's more like he was just trying to experience aliveness again, something like that. He never talked to me at all. He just would all of a sudden just come into my physical body and just hang out for a little bit. and then
Wow.
he would kind of lift upward and out.
Did it happen more than one time?
Oh, yes, it happened frequently. It happened a lot. In fact, even
Wow.
after we moved to another house, he must have followed us because he would do the same thing. And as I got a little bit older, this is kind of the neat part for everybody to hear. I, had enough ego strength, and I was old enough. I told him to knock it off, and that he couldn't come into my body anymore. And by gosh, he didn't.
That's incredible, actually. How long do you think overall he was hanging out?
That's a good question. I would say years. I would say probably 5 to 8 years, something like that. And see, as I got to be more of a teen or a preteen, I just had enough, and I told him to stop it, knock it off. And by gosh, he did. And that was my first clue that spirit people will actually do what we tell them to do if we mean it. We have to mean it.
Yeah, we are in charge of our boundaries more than we think and all of that. That's incredible.
Yes.
That's a really unusual one. Wow. Was that the only one that did that with you? Like sort of invasive, weird thing?
Mm-hmm. It always felt like the same man, yes.
Wow. And when you saw the other spirits, like how sort of real did they look, and were they kind of opaque or just like other people? And how did you know they were spirits if they weren't opaque?
Usually I would be able to see through them, so they were a bit transparent. The ones who have crossed over tend to be more transparent. And the ones who are, hanging around here on Earth tend to be more dense. But I could always tell because of that. You could kind of see through them and see what was on the other side of them.
Right. But you mentioned that afraid, or?
No, I never was, and I thought about that a lot, and I think it's just because I was so young that it became quite normal as the only thing I can figure out. That and my family expected the family to see and interact with deceased people.
How was your upbringing around this stuff? Were they really open to? Were your parents really open to these things existing?
Mm-hmm. Yes, in fact, it was considered normal. We were expected to be intuitive, and we were expected to know who was calling on the phone before we picked up, back then, before cell phones. And it was expected that we perceive deceased, especially family members. We were expected. It wasn't a surprise. We never had any classes. It was just an expectation. It was, I realize now how normalized they made it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very
which
normal.
probably explains why you weren't afraid much. That's quite unusual. Most people got shut down, from all sides, right, when they were young and growing up through this stuff.
Yes, terribly shut down. They're told they're making it up. They, knock it off, stop it, things like that.
Yeah, that's the norm. It's interesting, though, the other pattern I see by asking this question to everyone who joins us here, you get to compare notes, right? And around puberty, which is when you sort of established boundaries and got that guy to take a hike, that seems to be where we step into it more, or things go a little more crazy around that time of puberty. Did you see other things happening, changing around that time when you kind of stepped into your boundaries a little bit?
Well, I wasn't invaded upon anymore, but I would, as I got older, I would roam around. We lived on a farm, and I would roam around at night, in the middle of the night, And I would see a deceased farmer out behind the barn, and the animals were talking to me and things like that. So I had to, that was kind of in the early teens when I was out roaming around and just thought it was very natural. I realize it probably wasn't now, but
well, which one's natural, right? That one or the one we're told. The fact that you're on a farm and in nature probably played a part, I'm assuming. Did you ever get that sense?
Very much so, yes, because I was very isolated. I had a brother and sister, but I was the oldest, and, we didn't have any neighbors and things like that, so I had much more time to notice the non-physical, I think, is really what happened there.
Yeah. So when did things develop from there as you've grown up, you've been connected? What happened sort of next significant around the unseen for you?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, I always perceived spirit people around living people. And I'm a nurse, a psychiatric nurse specialist, and mental health counselor. And so oftentimes I would perceive a deceased person walk in at the same time my living client would walk in, for a counseling session. And oftentimes that person, the deceased person, didn't mean to do any harm, but was causing some conflicts or harm, for the living client. And so I, was always aware of those things. And then I started teaching Reiki a lot. And that's when the medical part came in, that I was suddenly looking inside of people's bodies. So that's kind of how that transitioned into mediumship and intuition, and then really became medical intuition. Was I was just very spontaneously seeing inside of people's bodies, even though I didn't mean to.
Did you say that? Did you say you were a psychiatric nurse before that?
Yes. Yes.
Like mainstream, like the kind of psychiatric nurse that thinks all this stuff is delusion and mental illness? that kind?
Yes. Yes,
you
I
got
was
to fill in the
undercover
blanks
apparently.
there. How did you get over there, and how did you know not to? What happened there? You hung a left somewhere on me here.
Well, boy, that's a good question. To me, it was so natural, but early on, I realized it wasn't natural for everyone. So, I kind of learned to keep my mouth closed about it. But I would see, like someone who is, I used to work literally in psychiatric units in the hospital. And so very, very, very mentally ill and disturbed people would be our patients. And frequently I would see, like a schizophrenic person, that they had multiple entities, multiple deceased people bothering them. But, I learned by then, my goodness, I was in my 20s and 30s and realized that, I couldn't go there in that environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What drew you to that line of work in the first place?
I was always interested in people's mental states. I was always interested in that. And when somebody suggested, why don't I go to nursing school, I thought, wait a minute, this would be a quick way to get into, the mental health field. I was never really that interested in the physical, medical, field of it. And because I love talking to people, I just love listening to their stories and their struggles. So it's just kind of a natural transition, I guess.
Yeah, it makes sense when you put it in that context, doing what you do now. So, yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious, though, when you were especially working, in mental health realms and the hospitals and stuff, because we've, remarked over the years many times, like how many people there are having real experiences and they're told they're delusions and being drugged. Did you ever get a sense of that when you were there?
Oh, frequently. And the physical world would often be, especially the medical world, would be so limited in their viewpoint that they would always think people were psychotic. Sometimes people were very, very, very disturbed, but it was common for them to try to medicate, all this away for people.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you describe or discover Reiki? How did that come into your path?
I was at a women's conference with a few other friends of mine, and somebody said, there were breakout sessions to learn things, and one of my friends said, well, let's take this Reiki. And I said, well, I don't know what it is. What is it? And they said, well, I don't know. It's some sort of energy medicine or energy work or something like that. And so I think there were 4 of us went into that class, and we actually were taught the first level of Reiki and given the attunement, and off I went with that, and I, finished the other levels of Reiki, and I started to include that in my counseling. See, I was in private practice after I left the hospital. I was in private practice for counseling, and I started offering Reiki, and people loved it. And while I was doing Reiki, I started picking up people's spirit guides, and I could, suddenly look inside of people. And so I finally got brave enough, and I asked people, the clients, I said, when the Reiki session, when we're done here, I received some intuitive information. Would you like to, and I was scared to death, and I said, would you like to hear about it? And, I'm telling you, I want everybody that's listening to this to realize no one said no. Everybody just lit up and was so excited, and they were so happy. And so I would have them sit down, and I would just tell them whatever I noticed inside of their body, or a deceased family member that came in, or sometimes an angel would come in and give a message. And people love that. And then I started drawing pictures for them, too, to show how their energy field looked like before the Reiki session, and how the energy field became more colorful and more beautiful during and after the Reiki. And I would recommend that to the listeners too, to, if you're receiving this information, draw a picture for people, because then hand it to them, because then they've got something concrete to take home with them.
So, we started with our famous first question. Let's carry that one on to the second stage. As you're discovering these things, I mean, you must have been having some profound new experiences that you didn't know were previously were possible. Do you remember any specific instances that just wowed you? Where it's real?
Well, people started validating what I would receive. I would pick up just, like vitamin D, D is dog. I would suddenly hear that in my mind, and so I would tell the client, boy, I'm getting that your vitamin D is too low. And they looked shocked, and they said they would have they had a lab test 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it showed that. So people will just naturally validate for you what we pick up. And the first thing, though, the very first thing I ever spontaneously looked into a body, I couldn't figure out what was even happening. And I looked around, and, I still had my hands on the client and was giving them Reiki, but I was seeing all these things in my mind's eye. And I thought, where am I in this person's body? And I was in their colon. And that was actually my very first experience. And she was an elderly Catholic nun, bless her heart. I'm not sure how it is she came to see me, but I followed her around, and I realized I was zooming. I felt like I was in a little spaceship zooming all around through her colon, and I came across a group of polyps that were black and looked terrible. And so we intuitives, if we're not licensed to diagnose, we what we can do is describe and describe and describe. So I described that she had a lumpy area that was really dark in color, didn't look, like it was flowing, and I just said those kind of descriptive words. And I asked her to please, because I was, I am a nurse too, and so I knew it was cancer, but I didn't say cancer to her, and I asked her if she would call her doctor that afternoon and get a colonoscopy. And bless her heart, she did, and they found the polyps right where I had drawn the picture for her. So what I tell people is this validation will just come naturally, and it'll really boost people up to realize how real this is. You've got lab tests, you have x-rays, you have ultrasounds that will confirm these things that we receive.
Wow, that's amazing. That was your first experience of that sort of validation of that nature?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the very first one. It was the very first time I was suddenly looking inside of somebody. And then she, bless her heart, she told me afterwards, she said, and I showed that picture to my doctor that you drew. I go, oh, no, you didn't. She goes, yes, I did. And she said, and that's exactly where he found cancerous polyps. And he says I'm fine now because she had them removed.
Wow. Well, that's wonderful. That's a brilliant story. What other validation ones like that have you experienced?
Oh, my goodness, all kinds of things. I have witnessed stones in gallbladders, any kind of physical thing, someone's thyroid that isn't functioning well. And it has a lot to do with the color of things, too. So I teach a lot about noticing colors and the shades of color that we perceive when we're working with somebody. And so, so like a pancreas, it will be all dim, it will be some darkness around it and not as bright as the other organs. And I will tell people that, and they'll say, oh, yes, I have, diabetes, and I already know, that I'm struggling with my pancreas. So I find that a lot. I found, I told someone that their toe was broken, and she said, oh, I hit it really hard, but, it's not broken. And then she got back with me, and she said that she finally got an x-ray, and it was broken right where I said it was. So, so it's the validation will just come so naturally to people. If people wonder if they're accurate or not, your clients will tell you.
Wow, that's amazing. So I know that we're talking about teaching in your show, but is this something that you're still actively doing, these sessions?
No, I became so busy teaching people how to do this. And one of my goals for my new show here is for people to realize how just as powerful you are as I apparently sound like I am, that this is a very, very natural ability that we have. And, my goal is to help people realize their own power and their own abilities. And I tell everybody that everybody is a natural intuitive, and everybody is a natural medium. It's really just a matter of noticing, I think, in different ways.
It's funny because the reason I asked that last question was my upstairs team was saying, ask about a demo, but I'll put that out there anyway. Did you want to do a mini demo session with me on the air here?
Yes, I sure can. Yeah, I sure will. So,
all right. What would we need to do to pull that off?
Well, I want to make sure that you are giving me permission and not the staff that is saying that. that's one of the things I would really focus on for people is with this ability not to misuse it and to be very, very cautious and very ethical. So I teach that quite a bit. So anyway, so if you give me permission, and it'll take a minute here for me to kind of adjust from thinking and talking to checking you out. And if you would, your job on your end is just to feel very, very open and just allow. See, it has a lot to do with allowing.
All right.
You have a really large beam of light coming up through the entire center of your body. And then there's also, you almost look like a glowing cross. And and I feel your heart. Your heart has a great deal of energy. I could be saying that to anybody, but I'm telling you really what I'm getting. And I felt your heart actually flutter around a little bit. I don't know if it's excitement or... Pardon?
Is that a good thing? What kind of fluttering?
Oh, well, it did feel like a fluttering, that you feel very, very excited about this. And the fact that you are glowing in the shape of a cross tells me how important your show is, how important this is for you to have people out there, helping each other. And that News for the Soul is, that title is one of the reasons, that I thought I would actually have a show on the station with you. So that's going on. Hold on just a second. The fluttering, by the way, to answer your question, is excitement. You seem a little tired. The top of your head is not as bright as the rest of you, so you feel a bit tired to me. Feels like okay, thank you for that validation. It feels like you've been traveling a bit. I'm seeing you traveling, just somewhat.
Interdimensionally.
Pardon?
Interdimensionally.
Well, yes. I'm fascinated that, and by the cross, I'm not suggesting the Christian cross. What I'm suggesting is the beam of light, the vertical and horizontal beam of light, crosses you right in your heart center. So that tells me that you have a big, big heart for this and for this level of work. And I have to keep saying that because my guides keep saying that. Now, hold on, please. There's just one other thing they want me to check out. They're showing me your belly button, but I think it's because I see that you do belly dancing. Is what I'm chuckling
very
about.
Sparkly belly button ring on. Probably distracting.
Yeah, that's very funny. That's cute. Your intestines are a bit sluggish, so I would. Now, the reason I say that is I'm pulled down to your intestinal area, and it's not as bright as the rest of your body that I'm describing. So it's a bit sluggish. More fiber, probiotics would help you. Intestines are often about. See, every part of our body is connected with thoughts and emotions. So thoughts and emotions are underneath everything going on, basically. And there's just, and when I say this, just notice whatever pops into your mind, and you certainly don't need to say it out loud. There's a bit of holding on to an old issue in life, and just see whatever pops up in your mind about that. Just kind of holding on. Something's not resolved, and so that's creating a sluggishness in your intestine. So,
yeah, I can relate to that.
Good. So I hope that's a good demonstration for everybody, I hope.
Very neat. And I'm also fascinated by this cross of light thing. Very cool.
It's very prominent. I mean, I can hardly see the rest of you because you're so bright. And, that really tells me, especially where it crosses, vertically like a Christian cross, although that's not what I'm getting. What this is about, it's your heart center is so big, and it's like shooting out through your arms and your hands. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was quite lovely, actually. Oh, and the color. Let me mention the color. It's like a bright golden yellow. So it's a very very high order.
It's funny when you mentioned it. I got a visual when you said you saw it. That's what I saw too when you were describing it. Interesting.
Yes. That's that validation that you just gave me. So thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you for the impromptu, unplanned mini session.
Well, you're welcome.
Very neat. Yeah. So, as you were saying, you had you got very busy. So, how long did that take to happen, and how were you steered towards teaching?
You have the best questions. My goodness. Well, when I was doing all this counseling and Reiki sessions, and I was in private practice by then, I was not working at the hospital. So, I did have to get out of that environment, after about 13 years because it was so limited. People needed, some people needed to be there, but it was a limited perspective from what I was aware of. And so I realized after a while in private practice that I was just kind of naturally teaching people how powerful they are, how able they are. And I realized more and more that I was teaching. And I thought, and I was doing Reiki then, so I thought, I got to write a book. So I wrote a book about Reiki, the Reiki Teacher's Manual. And then I wrote another Reiki book about Reiki and their intuition to combine those two together. And I realized that I was teaching more and more. And here locally, I was teaching meditation. I was doing little courses at our local metaphysical bookstore. So the teaching just began, and I love it. I just love it.
Just a natural progression.
Apparently, yes. I realized that I was doing more teaching to show people how to do these things for themselves. And that's really what led to, all of my 5 books. And then I've taught all over the world. And people are doing this, because it's natural. It's not only I always tell people it's not a gift that only a few people have. So that's my goal in life, is to help people realize that this isn't a special gift. We can all do it if we want.
Well, it's logical. I mean, look how many more people you've helped than just by, a single practice, right? So that's huge.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, and I love it when people go out and do this for other people. That's even better.
So on that note, what do you perceive doing for future shows?
Well, my hope is to begin with what intuition really is, what medical intuition really is, and mediumship, really those 3 focuses, and to at first tell people and help them to see what's getting in their way. because there are kind of some common things that get in the way that people are just assume they cannot do this, and yet they're yearning. So I would ask people to notice what you're yearning for. Are you yearning to speak with spirit? Are you yearning to be more and more intuitive? And so, I really plan to give very, very detailed information and also to experience something. So I hope people would want to, have an experience with each of my shows to really put this into action. I don't want to just jabber about it, every month, but to actually help people put this into action.
So can you explain more what kind of interaction you're looking at?
Well, yes, how to notice intuition. Oh, so for example, I have come up with really 18 pathways that the universe speaks to us. The world around us is a living being, and it is communicating with us constantly. It's just simply a matter of noticing it. So I came up with 18 pathways that the world around us is speaking to us. And I've noticed, too, that I love to talk about some controversial topics with intuition. So, I want to teach people what very specifically helped me to be as intuitive as I apparently am. And I want to really point out those details and how to do this and be accurate, and how to live with one foot in the physical and one foot in the non-physical at the exact same time. I like to describe it that way.
Well, which we're apparently doing. What kind of controversy are we talking here?
Well,
sounds fun.
There's, for one thing, I'm going to talk about, and a lot of people are very aware of energetic cords. And so I tell people wherever I'm teaching in different countries in the world, I'm running around all over the world trying to get people to stop cutting cords, because a lot of energy workers are cutting cords, and the cutting cords is not healing a cord. It's just chopping an energetic cord into a couple of pieces, I guess. So, that's one thing I want to talk about and explain why and how to heal a negative cord. And we all have cords, and a lot of our cords are very positive. If we have a good relationship with people, we energetically have very positive cords with them. And so I talk about not working with just any old being that says that they are a guide. I want to teach people how to be more discerning about who in the heck you're working with as a spirit guide, and that's quite controversial, people keep telling me. And meditation
I think it's sensible.
is the what?
I think it's more sensible than controversial.
Well, yes, that's about, but I've been told that it's, a lot of people think it's controversial. Yeah. And another thing, let's see, I'm trying to think what else. Oh, meditation. I meditate, and I taught meditation for about 10 years, but meditation is really not, in my humble opinion, a requirement to be spiritual. So I talk about that and all kinds of things like that.
And we're definitely on the same page with a lot of this stuff. Love it.
Oh, good.
Are you planning on having guests on?
Yes, I thought I would. I thought I would have some of my students actually that have mentored with me for quite some time. Ooh. And I send clients to them because I'm not doing readings and healings anymore because of teaching so much. So I thought that might be interesting to have, someone who's worked with me for a while. So I had that in mind.
Excellent. Any open lines interaction? Like if a lot of people are going to want to call in for healings and readings, that's a given, right? So if you're having your students on, are they going to do that, or are you at some point open to that during the shows?
I would hope that people would want to ask questions. I would love that, in how they can start doing readings for other people. But yes, I could ask, my students too, who've mentored with me for ages. I sure can ask them if they'd be open to it too. So, but I do like that interaction. I love it. Yeah. I love it if people would ask questions and things. I love that.
So I'm just keeping one eyeball on the time. It's just zipping along as it does here. Give us a whole overview of what it is you're doing present day, what you're offering, and what your whole focus is these days.
Well, right now I am in the midst of writing book number 6, and it's going to be very directly about mediumship and some different ways of looking at being a medium for the deceased. So I'm in the throes of writing that book, and I already mentioned my 2 books for Reiki, and then my other 3 books, 2 of them are to be a practitioner for medical intuition, and then the other medical intuitive book is about doing medical intuition for yourself, because what I'm finding is we healers are often very, very ill because we're not taking care of ourselves as we give and give and give and give to other people, that we have to take care of ourselves at least equally to what we give to others. So I very much want to emphasize that, to keep the healers healthier than what they are. So that, and I am really teaching more, especially since COVID's over. I'm scheduled all over the U.S. For 2024. So I'm tickled about that, to get back on the road now.
Oh,
to do
wonderful.
Yeah, to do live in-person classes. Yes.
Are you primarily across the U.S. or where else do you go, if anywhere?
Well, I've taught in New Zealand, Australia, Europe, the UK, where else? Canada and Mexico. So I've taught just everywhere. This year I'm scheduled 2 or 3 times in New York State and Chicago and Kansas City so far.
Beautiful. Well, we have lots of listeners in every one of those places you just listed.
So good
to know for the future.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, you mentioned about COVID and all that fun stuff. There was a lot of stuff. It's a very different world in the last few years. A lot of different energies and changes and challenges have gone, on and could be going on further in some ways. Yes. I'm curious what your personal perception was of that period of time and those changes and where the planet's at kind of right now.
Well, we're in, quite an upheaval. And when there is it's like a deconstruction has to happen before construction happens. And so some of it seems very, very turbulent, all these things going on. And there's such a great deal of fear going on. So once again, the brighter we can be in this time of all this conflict, I beg people, I help people to not identify themselves as empaths, because empaths are very, very intuitive, but they tend to absorb and identify the crises around them. And so what I would want for everybody to hear is it really is time for those of us with light to be even brighter. It's like you showed me this beautiful golden yellow cross in your energy field. And it's that brightness is what is key as we move forward, in not to get caught up in the depths of the darkness. So it's a deconstruction of old institutions, old ways of thinking, and to build something else. I'm not sure how else to put it, but
yeah. Well, you mentioned empaths too. I mean, I definitely relate to that challenge, and I'm surprised I was that bright today when you took a peek, because it's been very challenging, and probably normally just a ball of light. And I just got a couple beams going, you know.
Yeah, well, but they're real strong beams, though, from your heart.
Good.
That's good. Yes, I said you were tired, and you know.
Yes, yeah. That was everything you said was validated. Absolutely.
Oh, bless your heart.
But what, since we have a couple minutes to the top here, literally, why don't we get you to, whatever advice you can give for how to do that, especially for empaths and anyone that's really being drained by this, instead of being able to turn up their light. Like, how do we not get drained, and how do we turn up our light, especially for, that way, empathic?
Well, like I said, empaths are extremely intuitive and very, very, very sensitive. So especially those who identify themselves as empaths, and I used to identify myself as one, we tend to identify with suffering, but then we actually merge with the suffering also. And if we merge with the suffering, we could be sitting in our own living room watching terrible things on the news, and if we merge with that, think about it, we've just added to the suffering. And so I would ask people to pull their energy, literally. All we have to do is think it, and energy will follow our thoughts. We pull our energy back from what we're getting sucked into, pull our energy back, and then literally brighten up our own field. And one picture I would ask people to consider is become the brightest light bulb that you can imagine, that you're literally so full of brightness from inside shining outward, just like a light bulb. When you turn it on, the light's in the center of the light bulb, and then it is so bright it shines outward in all directions. And that us being the brightest light of all is going to be more helpful, because everything's energy, everything. Even what we see on TV, it's energy is happening. And to be the brightest light and not get pulled into the darkness, because all that does is add to the heavy negative energy. And for us all to be a bright, bright, bright light, first of all. And all we have to do is think it, and the energy will actually follow. I love it when science and the ooh-wah-wah, combine. So science is finding, too, that our thoughts are so powerful that it creates energy, but energy also follows our thoughts. And so our thoughts are creating our illness or our health as well.
Oh, so glad I asked. What a perfect note to end on.
Oh. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Here's what we've got. We've got a couple minutes just at the very tippy top here. Our tradition is at the end of every show to do shameless self-promotion. So anything, any specific programs you've got going on, and how to get a hold of you for them, and whatever you'd like to mention, you've got some time to just let it rip.
Oh my goodness. Okay, let me think about letting it rip. Well, my website is very simple. It's just my name, tinazion.com, Zion. So tinazion.com. And on my website, you'll see that I'll be teaching an Omega Institute in New York State, and also Fellowships of the Spirit in New York State. I'm teaching for Infinity Foundation in Chicago. I'm hosted by a wonderful woman named Tammy Barton in Kansas City. And so those are all throughout the spring and in the summer, I think. And gosh, you'll see the information about my books. Like I said, you Reiki people out there, I have, if you've been wondering how to teach Reiki to other people, my Reiki Teacher's Manual will give you the guidelines about how to do that and what to do. And then the reason I wrote Reiki in Your Intuition, my second Reiki book, is because so many people told me that their teachers said never include intuition in your Reiki sessions. And I said, well, I don't know how you're going to keep it out. I said, that's how my medical intuition started. So I thought, whoops, I better write another book. So I wrote Reiki in Your Intuition and how to combine those two together, the energy of Reiki and intuition. And then many people want to become medical intuitive practitioners. So my two books, Become a Medical Intuitive and then Advanced Medical Intuition, are really, all of my books are teaching manuals. You know, I'm really not a writer. I just write whatever I teach in my live classes is what I write. So they're really teaching manuals. And then my last book is Be Your Own Medical Intuitive. Be Your Own Medical Intuitive. And I'm telling you, I have come across so many intuitives, mediums, and medical intuitives that are struggling with their own health. And so that's why I wrote that book, to help the healers heal themselves. We've got to take time to take care of ourselves equally. We don't have to take care of ourselves more, but at least equally to what we are caring for everybody else. And so, and like I said a little while ago, I'm also working now on a mediumship book and how to do, mediumship in some new and different ways.
Yay. Well, it was so great to get to know you today, Tina. I'm so excited about your next shows coming up on News for the Soul. And yeah, it's a wonderful first start.
Oh, bless your heart. Thank you so much. I've had a great time.
Me too. Welcome to the News for the Soul family. And we'll talk to you next time. Well, next month.
All righty. Thank you.
Tina, she's always up at newsforthesoul.com. And we're back with more. Open lines later today is happening 3 p.m. Pacific time. We're back with more after this.
News for the Soul begins its 27th year in January 2024. Find out our latest news at newsforthesoul.com.